A royal reunion is now hanging in the balance. The King and Prince Harry are locked in an uncomfortable deadlock after Buckingham Palace withdrew its offer to host the Duke of Sussex during his week-long visit to the UK.
The British public was told Prince Harry was completely alone. The tabloids were parading his downfall. A devastating High Court defeat. Evicted from royal housing. Denied police protection. He was supposed to be a man utterly crushed, wandering London without a single ally left in the country. Instead, he was smiling. He was flashing a thumbs up to the press cameras. Why? Because behind those dark-tinted windows rolling off the tarmac at Farnborough, Meghan Markle had just landed on British soil. Archie and Lilibet were in the back seat. The ultimate royal surprise was underway. They bypassed every public terminal. They dodged the photographers. They pulled off the most secretive move of their post-royal lives, racing north toward Highgrove for an unannounced face-to-face with King Charles and Queen Camilla. The media called it a miracle reconciliation. The public thought the Sussexes had finally won. They were dead wrong. What was supposed to be a historic family reunion didn't end in peace. It ended in complete, catastrophic ruins. Within hours of those gates closing, the atmosphere inside Highgrove turned completely ice-cold. A secret paper trail was uncovered. Strict palace demands were triggered, and a quiet, devastating showdown took place behind closed doors that effectively shattered what was left of the royal household's trust forever. If this institutional maneuvering surprises you, subscribe before we get into what happened next. Hi viewers, do you believe Meghan came to the UK for a genuine family reunion? Or was this trip strictly a strategic move for publicity? Type reunion or publicity in the comments right now. To truly understand how explosive this moment was, you have to look at the sheer desperation leading up to it. For months, the narrative surrounding the Montecito couple had been spiraling out of control. Their American deals were stalling. Executive interest was cooling off. The public had grown exhausted by the constant stream of complaints, podcasts, and lifestyle rebrands that failed to capture the global spotlight. Industry insiders openly whispered what everyone already knew. Without a tangible, visible connection to the crown, the Sussex brand was rapidly fading into irrelevance. They didn't just want a royal connection, they desperately needed one. Prince Harry's solo appearance in London was engineered as a masterclass in misdirection. While he walked into courtrooms and non-profit centers, the media fell right into the trap. Daily headlines fixated on his isolated state. Reports detailed his ongoing security battles, painting the picture of a prince stranded on an island of his own making. Commentators openly mocked his legal setbacks, claiming he had reached absolute rock bottom. But while the cameras were focused on his every footstep in central London, the real operation was quietly unfolding hundreds of miles away. Every single move had been mapped out with surgical precision. The flight path, the security handoffs, the clearance protocols, it was all designed to bypass the palace's traditional media channels. They didn't notify the royal press pack. They didn't send out public relations teasers. They relied on private VIP corridors, discreet escort vehicles, and off-grid transit schedules that allowed them to slip into the country completely unnoticed. It was a high-stakes gamble. If they could get Meghan and the children inside the gates of Highgrove before the media caught wind, they would hold all the cards. The stakes could not have been higher for Meghan Markle. Returning to the United Kingdom meant stepping directly back into the lion's den. She knew the intense hostility waiting for her in the British press. She knew the public outrage that followed her previous departure. Facing a public arrival at a commercial airport would have meant facing hostile crowds, flashing camera bulbs, and an onslaught of critical coverage. By arriving in complete secrecy, She eliminated the public risk entirely while positioning herself for the ultimate private prize, direct FaceTime with the reigning monarch. The journey from Farnborough to Highgrove was executed with military precision. The convoy bypassed standard public arrival gates, utilizing private VIP transit corridors designed to prevent media tracking. For the Sussex team, this secrecy was a tactical victory. It allowed them to bypass the British tabloids, avoid public scrutiny, and secure direct access to the king without facing uncomfortable questions at public events. A single photograph of Charles with his grandchildren would have reshaped the international narrative overnight. An official image inside Highgrove could have rebuilt a fading public brand in a single instant. Proximity to the crown is the lifeblood of royal media value. Without access to the institution, the commercial appeal begins to dry up. The Sussexes understood this dynamic better than anyone. Yet, the silence surrounding the arrival was not just a protective measure for the family, it was a demand enforced by the palace. For years, Buckingham Palace had operated under a policy of extreme caution when dealing with Montecito. The institution had been burned too many times by intimate private details surfacing in foreign media markets. Aides were acutely aware that private conversations, informal family meals, and confidential discussions had a strange habit of finding their way into broadcast documentaries and tell-all memoirs. The trust was not just frayed, it was utterly obliterated. Because of that fractured history, senior palace officials had established an ironclad operational framework long before the private jet departed California. They made it abundantly clear to Harry's representatives that any family access would come with non-negotiable legal and security stipulations. This was not going to be an open-door family gathering. It was an institutionally regulated encounter designed to protect the sovereign at all costs. Aides inside Buckingham Palace had learned hard lessons from previous years. Private conversations shared in confidence had repeatedly reappeared in books, television interviews, and streaming series. Trust was not merely frayed, it was non-existent. Consequently, the private security operational note, drafted for the Highgrove visit, contained explicit directives. Every personal device brought onto the property by visiting guests was subject to surrender at the perimeter security post. Furthermore, the operational note dictated that no unauthorized external staff, private publicists, or independent media liaison officers would be permitted past the outer estate security zone. The Royal Protection Command was issued direct orders to verify the identity of every occupant in the approaching motorcade. Protocols were logged, security clearance codes were checked, and the precise timing of the convoy's transit was continuously relayed back to the King's personal private office. As the blacked-out SUVs cleared the outer gates of Highgrove, Prince Harry's relaxed expression began to shift. The environment inside the grounds was not warm. It was formal, guarded, and cold. The manicured gardens and rolling green grounds of Highgrove usually offered a serene, peaceful escape for the king. But on this morning, the air was thick with tension. Uniformed officers stood at attention alongside senior plainclothes security officials. There were no enthusiastic greetings waiting at the entrance. There was no royal welcoming committee standing on the steps. Instead, the vehicles were directed past the main hall toward a secure inner courtyard where access could be tightly regulated, away from estate workers. The estate security team approached the vehicles as they pulled into the inner courtyard. Protocol was initiated immediately. Personal communications equipment was requested by duty officers before any entry into the main residence was permitted. Duty officers held open metal transport cases, stepping forward to politely, but firmly, request that all mobile phones, encrypted tablets, and smart recording devices be surrendered into security custody. It was a moment of profound humiliation for a prince of the realm, a stark reminder that inside these walls, he was no longer trusted as a working member of the family. The terms were simple: comply with the protocol, or the heavy oak doors of Highgrove would remain permanently shut. At that exact moment, an urgent operational dispatch arrived at the Highgrove security office from palace liaison officers monitoring external production logistics in the home counties. The security office was alerted to a sudden, unauthorized disturbance along the peripheral transport routes. Intelligence units tracking media footprint activity had flagged an anomaly that immediately raised alarms within the senior household leadership. The dispatch confirmed a critical detail: an independent commercial camera unit, operating under contract for an overseas production project, had just been spotted tracking the route of the motorcade near the Oxfordshire border. It was not a standard tabloid paparazzi crew on motorbikes. It was a fully equipped, high-definition production team carrying commercial-grade filming gear, operating within miles of the royal estate's private boundaries. The discovery sent shockwaves through the palace security apparatus. The Sussexes had given their solemn word that no commercial enterprise was attached to this journey. Yet here was concrete evidence that a filming crew was actively tracking their movements across the English countryside. The visit was not even an hour old, and the agreement was already unraveling. The security dispatch sent an immediate chill through the Highgrove holding office. A single line on an encrypted screen changed the entire afternoon. To understand why a camera crew 4 miles away sent shockwaves through the royal household, you have to look at the paper trail that governs this family. In July 2020, during the bitter finalization of the Megxit transition, a document was quietly filed into the royal archives at Windsor. It was known internally as the Private Family Accord. It wasn't a public statement. It was a legally binding undertaking, signed by senior aides and witnessed by royal trustees. The core clause was explicit: any future access to crown properties, sovereign residences, or private family gatherings remained strictly contingent on absolute zero commercial exploitation, no footage, no audio logs, no subsequent monetization of private royal encounters. For 6 years, that record sat in a secure vault, an invisible line in the sand. Now, on a rainy morning in August 2026, that founding promise was put to the test. As duty officers inside Highgrove processed the arrival, an internal security review was already underway in London. A routine cross-reference check conducted by the Royal Protection Group uncovered something far more troubling than a rogue paparazzi vehicle. 4 days prior to the Sussex Charter touching down at Farnborough, a commercial filming permit application had been lodged with the local council in Northamptonshire. The target location wasn't Highgrove. It was Althorp Estate. Althorp is the ancestral home of the Spencer family, the final resting place of Princess Diana. The permit application cited a high-definition production unit requesting private perimeter access for late August, aligning perfectly with the approaching 30th anniversary of Diana's passing. The production company listed on the form was a third-party contractor, frequently utilized by major American streaming platforms. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle began sliding into place with terrifying clarity. Why would a trip that was framed as a private reconciliation with King Charles overlap with commercial permits at Diana's grave? Was the Highgrove reunion a genuine attempt to heal old wounds? Or was it the respectability cover needed to validate a far more lucrative project down the road. Think about the contradiction. Highgrove was kept completely secret. No official photographs were taken. No media announcements were released. On the surface, it looked like total compliance with palace rules. But what if the secrecy at Highgrove was just a smokescreen? What if the real money shot wasn't a grandfather holding his grandchildren, but a quiet, emotional walk through the gates of Althorp? A picture of Charles at Highgrove can be blocked by palace security, but the sovereign has no legal authority over Althorp Estate. Inside the private holding room at Highgrove, the air grew heavy. The children were guided toward an adjacent garden room, unaware of the quiet operational panic unfolding in the corridors. Prince Harry stood near the window, his hands in his pockets, watching security officers examine the perimeter bounds. A senior official from the Lord Chamberlain's office stepped into the room holding a leather-bound folder. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't offer a dramatic speech. He simply opened the folder and placed a copy of the Northamptonshire permit filing on the table. Beside it lay a copy of the 2020 Private Family Accord. The official looked directly at Prince Harry. The message was delivered without emotion. Tea with the King would not commence until every logistical detail of the UK trip was fully accounted for. The silence in the room was deafening. The Sussex legal team insisted the Althorp filing was a routine, pre-existing arrangement, completely separate from the family visit. But in the world of royal intrigue, coincidence is a luxury no one can afford. Aides knew that if footage of Diana's resting place appeared in a commercial documentary, alongside stories of a secret Highgrove reunion, the Crown's private boundaries would be completely shattered. Then came the second revelation. A digital audit of the tracking telemetry showed that the camera unit spotted near Oxfordshire wasn't just taking random landscape shots. They were following a pre-mapped operational route, a route that matched the exact itinerary provided by Harry's office to the palace 2 days prior. The operational note hadn't just been used to coordinate security, it had been shared. Harry stared at the paperwork on the table. The smile he had displayed so confidently to the London cameras hours earlier was completely gone. He was trapped between the demands of his commercial obligations in California and the rigid, unyielding protocol of the institution he had left behind. Outside, rain began to fall heavily over the gardens. The scheduled multi-day stay was slipping away by the minute. A quiet signal was sent from the security desk to the King's personal private quarters. The sovereign was waiting, but the paperwork had already spoken. Just as the legal team began assembling their response, a second memo arrived from the outer gatehouse. A secondary drone unit had just been detected, hovering along the boundary tree line of Althorp Estate, actively logging test angles for an upcoming shoot. The quiet pressure campaign had officially begun. The institutional double standard was exposed in plain sight. For years, other members of the royal family had adhered to strict, unyielding protocols regarding commercial work and private access. Rules were enforced without exception. Yet here was a sequence of small, individual actions, each one easily deniable on its own, but together revealing a deliberate strategy to push the boundaries of the original agreement. Consider the first incident. A production team associated with Prince Harry's Invictus work arrives at a quiet location just 3 miles from the Highgrove Estate grounds. When questioned by local police officers, the crew leader presents official credentials. Their explanation is simple, rehearsed, and completely deniable. They are merely capturing atmospheric background footage for a sports recovery documentary. On paper, it sounds legitimate. But why choose an isolated road along the exact transit path of the royal motorcade? It was a classic pattern interrupt, a test to see how closely palace security was actually watching. Then came the second incident, just 2 hours later. A detailed operational briefing note, containing exact timestamps of the family's movement schedule, was mysteriously leaked to a small group of national media editors in London. It didn't come through official Buckingham Palace press channels. It was distributed anonymously from a digital server traced back to a private media consultancy in the United States. The leak was framed as a routine update, but the timing was devastating. It created immediate speculation that the Sussexes were being blocked by palace bureaucracy, building public sympathy while the private meeting was still taking place. Every single event was designed to look accidental. A camera crew here, a leaked operational note there, a drone permit filed months in advance. Isolated, each piece could be brushed off as standard media noise, but when pulled together inside the Highgrove security room, the true motive surfaced with alarming clarity. This wasn't an accidental series of logistical hiccups. It was a systematic content farming operation. The multi-million-dollar streaming contracts secured in California were reaching their final renewal deadlines. The initial novelty of post-royal tell-alls had worn off. Executives were no longer interested in generic lifestyle programming or secondary media projects. They wanted hard, authentic, high-value royal content. They needed proximity. They needed emotion. And nothing carries more global emotional weight than the story of Princess Diana's legacy passed down to her grandchildren. The equation was painfully simple. A meeting with King Charles provides institutional credibility. A visit to Diana's grave at Althorp provides the emotional climax. If you tie those two elements together in a slick, 6-part documentary series, the commercial value skyrockets into the tens of millions. Now look at the double standard that pushed the royal household past its breaking point. When Prince William conducts official business or private visits, every single photographic release is cleared through the institutional press office. No private cameras enter, no commercial crews follow, no anonymous leaks outline his private movements. He complies fully with the institutional framework established to protect the Crown's integrity. Yet the Sussex team operated under a completely different set of rules. They claimed to demand total privacy for their children, using security concerns as the primary reason for avoiding public events in Britain. Yet while public appearances were rejected on safety grounds, private commercial production infrastructure was quietly moving parallel to their entire UK itinerary. They used privacy as a shield against public scrutiny, while simultaneously using commercial crews to harvest private moments for future release. Inside the Highgrove Library, the tension reached an unbearable pitch. The quiet, measured pace of royal bureaucracy was about to collide directly with the hard realities of commercial media contracts. An aide walked into the room and placed a third file on the desk. It contained aerial photography captured by security patrols over Althorp Estate just 45 minutes earlier. The images clearly showed marked production vehicles positioned along the private access roads leading to the burial island. The deniability was gone. The excuses were exhausted. The quiet pressure campaign had failed to force the palace into a passive compromise. Instead, it had triggered the exact institutional response Harry and Meghan had worked so desperately to avoid. The King's private secretary stood up, picked up the files, and walked toward the inner study where Charles was waiting. The door opened. The final confrontation was only seconds away. The inner study at Highgrove was quiet. The heavy oak door swung open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Standing near the desk was Sir Edward Young, a senior institutional defender who had spent decades serving the Crown in absolute silence. He was not a loud man. He did not engage in public arguments, but he understood every inch of the palace machinery. He was the personification of institutional authority. Beside him sat the folder containing the Althorp aerial surveillance, the leaked transit notes, and the 2020 private family accord. Meghan and Harry stepped into the room. The provocation came immediately. Prince Harry raised his voice, demanding to know why his family was being subjected to security protocols reserved for high-risk targets, rather than receiving a warm, private welcome from his father. He argued that bringing Archie and Lilibet to Britain was a massive emotional concession. He claimed they had risked their public standing just to grant the king time with his grandchildren. Meghan stood beside him, her expression composed, arguing that their privacy had been respected because no media announcements had been authorized by their team. Sir Edward did not interrupt. He waited for the silence to return. Then, he delivered the boundary statement. His tone was calm, flat, and completely final. He stated that family access to the sovereign is a privilege built on trust, not a negotiable asset for media production. He explained that the presence of commercial tracking units near Highgrove and unauthorized camera crews at Althorp proved that the terms of the visit had already been compromised. Prince Harry attempted to dismiss the camera crews as independent media over which they had no direct control. That was when the leverage was revealed. Sir Edward reached down and opened the leather file on the table. He did not offer accusations. He simply laid out the evidence. First, the encrypted telemetry showing the commercial camera crew following the private motorcade's exact non-public route. Second, the local permit filings in Northamptonshire signed by third-party contractors directly tied to their American production company. And finally, the binding clause of the 2020 Accord. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. The argument of plausible deniability collapsed in a single second. Then came the stopping line. Sir Edward looked directly at Prince Harry and said, "If your written word isn't worth the paper it's signed on today within these walls, your place within this family won't be worth much tomorrow." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. It was a principle-level boundary. The dispute was no longer about a family visit or a grandfather meeting his grandchildren. It was about the structural integrity of the monarchy. If the Crown allowed its private sanctuary to be used as background framing for commercial media projects, the authority of the institution would be permanently eroded. Prince Harry tried to speak, but the words faltered. Meghan realized the game was over. The calculated gamble had failed. The leverage they thought they held had turned into an absolute institutional trap. There was no shouting match. There was no dramatic storming out. Instead, Meghan made a swift, quiet decision. She turned toward the doorway and gave the signal to her security detail. The meeting was aborted. The scheduled multi-day stay at Highgrove, meant to represent a historic royal reconciliation, was cut down to less than 4 hours. The reunion hadn't just cooled down, it had turned ice cold. The departure from Highgrove was swift, silent, and entirely undramatized. The blacked-out SUVs pulled out of the courtyard at 1:42 p.m., accelerating past the main gates into the falling rain. There were no farewells on the steps. There were no photographs taken for the royal archives. The vehicle doors closed, and the convoy vanished back down the private access route toward the airfield. The immediate consequences unfolded like clockwork. First, the planned pilgrimage to Althorp Estate was abruptly cancelled. Security clearance for the family's transit into Northamptonshire was officially revoked by palace liaison officers. The commercial camera crews parked near the perimeter tree line were informed by local law enforcement that private drone authorizations over the burial site had been rescinded. The lucrative footage of Diana's resting place was lost. Second, the relationship consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Inside Highgrove, King Charles returned to his private study without issuing a single public statement. Phone lines between Montecito representatives and Buckingham Palace private secretaries were formally restricted. All future correspondence was redirected through external legal counsel. The door to informal, private family access was locked from the inside. Then came the impact on the next generation. Archie and Lilibet were buckled into the back of the escort vehicles, driven away from their grandfather's home after spending less than 2 hours on the estate grounds. They were whisked back to a private charter without ever understanding the institutional war taking place over their heads. The opportunity for them to build a real, lasting connection with the royal family was quietly severed. 24 hours later, the formal written outcome arrived. Buckingham Palace released a brief, 2-sentence statement to the press. It contained no warmth. It contained no details. It simply confirmed that Prince Harry and his family had undertaken a brief private visit while in the United Kingdom. What the public saw was a story of a quiet family attempt at peace. What insiders privately knew was that an irreversible boundary had been drawn in stone. Behind closed doors, a binding codicil was permanently added to the Royal Household Security Manual. Any individual entering Crown property under private status who is actively engaged in commercial streaming contracts must now submit to full perimeter device confiscation without exception. The story didn't end with a shouting match. It ended on paper. The heavy iron gates of Highgrove clicked shut under the grey Gloucestershire sky. Rain washed over the long driveway, erasing the tyre tracks of the departure. On paper, the visit was recorded as completed. In reality, the distance between California and the Crown had never been wider. Institutional boundaries will always prevail over private commercial ambitions. When you try to weaponize the sanctuary of the Crown for personal gain, the institution doesn't fight back with noise. It freezes you out in complete silence. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think King Charles was right to enforce these strict security boundaries on his own son, or did the palace go too far in shutting down the reunion? Type palace if you support the king's stance, or type Harry if you think the family deserved a second chance. Drop your thoughts in the comments below right now. If this deep dive into royal intrigue brought you value, hit the like button, share this video with fellow royal followers, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an investigation. You think this Highgrove shutdown was the end of the story? It wasn't. Next week, we uncover the private financial audit leaked directly from a major streaming network's legal department. A single document that reveals the exact multi-million-dollar penalty clause Prince Harry faces if he fails to deliver authentic royal footage by the end of the year. You cannot afford to miss what comes next. Subscribe now, and I'll see you in the next video.